Hello, and welcome to my series of lectures on multicultural communication. My name is Dr. Marquita Byrd, and my students call me Dr. B, which is great. I hope I'll hear you say that if I ever meet you in person. Uh, these lectures are designed for two purposes. The first purpose is to help us as speaker and listener become more comfortable with diversity in our nation. After all, America is a diverse nation today and yesterday and in the future. And many of us feel discomfort with that diversity because there's ambiguity. We don't know exactly what's going on. We don't know how to respond. And I'm hoping that these lectures help us to learn how to do that. The second thing is that I would like for us to facilitate the acquisition of new knowledge and new skills that will allow us to be better communicator in the multicultural setting. So many issues in our nation cannot, I won't give you a lie and say that communication can solve all the problems, but better communication can allow us to come to better solutions. So come with me today as I talk about a topic called, I'm going to talk about conflicts. And wow, you can talk about conflicts everywhere in interpersonal relationships, within your community, etc. and so forth. Conflicts are ever present, and therefore we need to know how to either manage them or solve them. The issue is you can't do that unless you know what you're arguing about. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you were arguing with your children or with your partner or with your friends, but you could not really put your finger on what you were arguing about? Let me give you this example. When my children were young, there was a period in my life where every day I was going to work and I was feeling so tired, so stressed out before I ever got to work. And I stopped one day and thought to myself, why am I feeling so tired and stressed out before I even get started? And I thought back over my morning routine, and I realized my every day, my sons, I don't know why they were doing this, were arguing about the pink cereal bowl. Now, the pink cereal bowl, because they were arguing about it, who's going to use it first? I don't want you to use it. And so I was trying to manage this conflict every morning. So conflicts can be over very small things, but it's not the same thing as having a difference of opinion. I want to point that out. You can have differences of opinion with people without getting in a conflict. Those things can be talked through. So let's talk specifically. Let's get a definition of conflict. Conflict is an expressed struggle over resources that are scarce or they appear to be scarce. And you might say to yourself, what is a resource? A resource is anything that people want, they need, or they think they want it or need it. When I say think they want it or need it, for example, having thinking that you need a $17,000 purse. That's not a purse is not a resource, but if you think you have to have it, it becomes a resource. And let's talk about resources that are scarce or those that appear to be scarce. Uh, Resources are things that we use to live with and that sort of thing. There's some resources that are scarce, like the amount of earth we have to live on, the amount of ground we have to live on. There's finite amount, and especially in cities, and so it's scarce. The city that I live in, it's very scarce. Whereas if you go to the Midwest, you buy a house, you got 5 acres, for $100,000. So it's a resource that is scarce or appears to be scarce. My children used to argue over, well, not argue over, but if I kiss one and hug one, then the other had to try to come over and push that person out of the way, and they want to get hugs and kisses too. Well, the fact is that my expressions of affection are not scarce. I have unlimited love for both of my kids, and I give them as many hugs and kisses as they want until they got old enough to say, "Oh, mom, stop kissing me." But they would struggle over that, and I explained to them, "I love you, I love him, and I give you all the kisses you wanted." But they treated it as though it was a scarce resource. We do that with love all the time. If I'm dating you, you can't love me and love somebody else at the same time because you can only love so many people at a time, which is ridiculous. But that's another lecture for my interpersonal class. It's an express struggle over resources that are scarce or appear to be scarce. Now, conflict can occur internally within yourself, or it can occur externally between you and someone else. External conflict, let's say it's final exams time and you want to make sure you get a great grade on your exam. However, your friends are going out for a party and it's at your favorite place and you have conflict. Okay, am I going to stay in and study or am I going to go out for the party? And so you struggle with these things because you really want to get a good grade, but you really want to go party with your friends. And so you struggle with that and try to manage that or resolve that. Now, conflict can happen over goals. In other words, what are we trying to do here? What is the goal we have? Or it can conflict can occur over the way to meet goals. For example, on any survey, about 80% of Americans will say that housing the homeless is important. We all agree on that. However, the way, how will we do this? And most people say, well, I don't want it in my backyard. I don't want those homeless people in my backyard. I don't want to give up land for those homeless people, et cetera, and so forth. So the conflict becomes, how will we house them? But great issue in all major cities. The last thing is that the people have an interdependent goal. You've heard of dependent, but interdependent means that you're trying to reach a goal that cannot be met alone or cannot be met by one group. We have to work together. We have to depend upon each other to meet the goal. So conflict can be a bit complicated, but it's an express struggle over differences in how the goals that we're trying to reach, resources that we have, etc., and so forth. Right now, we're having a big conflict in America over women's rights and who has the right to a woman's body. We have different ideas about that and different interpretations. So we're having conflict about that. So we have conflicts over many things. And the thing is that not all conflicts can be solved. Remember that. Not all conflicts can be solved. So we have to work to manage them effectively. So that's what our goal is. Now, sometimes conflicts are difficult to manage or solve because we have these myths about conflict. You know, we hear all these things from our religious texts. We hear that you shouldn't have conflicts, you shouldn't fight. Culturally, we have conflicts about it. For example, we have these myths about conflict. The first one is that conflict is abnormal. If you're having conflict, there's something wrong. Conflict is normal. It is inevitable whenever you are in a relationship that lasts across time. Conflict will occur. Conflict will occur with your best friend. Conflict will occur with your parents. Conflict will occur with your neighbors. So conflict is a natural thing. It's not abnormal. The second thing is that, or you hear people say, well, you know, they argue, and so there's something wrong with the relationship. Not really. If you see people in an intimate relationship, they're married, they're boyfriend, girlfriend, and they never have conflict, I would say something wrong in the relationship if they never have conflict. So the exact opposite. The second thing is we believe that conflict should never be escalated. Don't escalate. Don't bring it out and talk about it. Let's hide it under the rug. Actually, in order to bring about productive management, we have to escalate it sometimes. For example, my son, when he was a teenager, and I have a son who is behavioral disordered and now lives in jail, and so he was a difficult child to raise. And so sometimes he did things. Often he did things that we were in conflict, but sometimes I had to raise them to a level that I could get his attention so that I could solve a conflict. Like when he got 15, one day I was trying to tell him to do something and he kind of puffed himself up physically, stood up like he was going to challenge me. I couldn't let that go. I had to respond to that. My son felt like he was old enough that he would challenge me physically. So I had to escalate that conflict in order to make sure I got control of it. So I raised my voice. I let him know that that is not a thing to do. And as one of my girlfriends said, if you scare your mother, then you shouldn't be alive. I know that sounds drastic, but when you're a single mother and you got a son who's standing over you and challenging you, I said a number of things to him. I escalated it so he would understand this is not acceptable. You can't do that. So sometimes you do have to escalate it in order to manage it. A third myth is that solving conflict should be orderly and it should be polite. No, when you're having conflict, usually it's pretty messy. Everybody has to talk about their feelings and their fears, and it may not be polite. And so you may see that, but then you want to come to order and politeness. Third thing, misconception about conflict is that anger is the primary emotion of conflict. So sometimes people who are having a conflict with others, they'll say, well, you're just angry. You just have all this anger, and if you get rid of the anger, no, that's not it. Maybe we don't want the same goals, or we're not trying to reach the goals in the same way. The last one is that one should fight the right way to resolve conflict. If you have conflict, when we say fight, I don't mean physical conflict, but we have to vote. We have to press forward. Sometimes we have to litigate. Sometimes we have to appeal to authority. So we do want to work. When they say fight, I would say work. We want to work towards solutions. But I insist that they always be nonviolent situations. Now let's go to point 3. I'm talking about these sources. What the heck are they? Sources of conflict. The first one is the allocation of resources. And if you look at my PowerPoint, you'll see more about this. The allocation of resources is very important. I told you what a resource is, anything that people want or they need or they think they wanted or needed. So we could say clean water, clean air, land, food, education. We have conflict in this country over education. As you see, the scandal, people are paying, humongous amounts of money to get their kids into the best schools. And if they got together and spent that money, they could have their own college. But allocation of resources. The second one is variations among people. We have conflict over the differences in cultures, the differences in groups that are actually minute things. For example, in the 70s, one of the greatest conflicts in public school was hair. Believe it or not, hair. When I came to San Jose, they actually had a policy in the junior high that girls could only wear their hair so high. People would go around and measure their hair in terms of how tall it was because they said it was distracting to the students at school. In my age growing up, it was about afro hair and braids that people were wearing. And people would say, well, you shouldn't wear your hair like that. I remember when I first came home with my first afro. I went off to college. I cut my hair off. My mom had spent 18 years growing it to my shoulders, and I cut it off. They were very upset. What have you done? And I played piano at my church, for my church. And some of the church members said, well, you shouldn't be coming to church with your hair like that. When you're sitting at the piano, you should have long hair that's flowing on your shoulders. What bullcrap. I got to wear my hair like I want to hair, but do it. But variations among people. Beards, for example. We have rules about beards and so forth. Variations among people. Should you wear a turban or not? Last year, I saw this that I thought was terrible, but 2 young men who wanted to do a senior day prank, if you want to call it, they wore dresses to school. The dresses were very demure. They were black. They had on their shirts, and they had on black socks and their tennis shoes. Well, they were punished by the high school because it said that they were causing disorder in the classroom. Here's the thing. Nobody cares if a girl wears pants. She can wear pants, she can wear a dress or whatever she wants. But these boys were criticized, and there was conflict because they wore a dress. Inherited legacy. Very often people have conflict because, well, like the Hatfields and the McCoys, we always were in conflict. We don't like each other, and if we can, we'll kill each other. And at some point, they forget what the original conflict was about. They just, carrying the fighting on. So inherited legacy, attitudinal interference. We just, in one of my previous shows, talked about isms. Isms are attitudes, philosophical positions that cause us to respond to somebody in a positive, neutral, or negative way. So that can get in the way. Lack of cultural literacy, meaning you don't know what your culture is, and you don't know what anybody else's culture is. So I suggest that you learn yours first. You need to go and read about who you are and who your people are and where you came from. What are your values? Know that first, and from that strong position, you can appreciate other people's culture. Lastly, we have a social conflict is that we fail to see America as a whole. We fail to see America as people who are interdependent. We tend to see America as my people and your people, or my state and your state, or my race and your race. When it all comes down, we are tied together, and whatever happens to you happens to me. But we fail to see that. So conflicts happen in every society, in every relationship. And we have various sources of conflict, which I'll talk more about in my PowerPoint. I want to say that it's not conflict that is dangerous. It is unmanaged conflict. For example, if a couple breaks up and they have conflict, that's not bad. You manage it. But very often when we break up, we try to kill each other. We try to kill each other emotionally. We try to kill each other physically. And sometimes we kill each other financially. That's an unmanaged conflict. And we don't want those. Try not to let conflicts rise to the level of physical violence. Remember Dr. King's work, and the Mahatma Gandhi said that it's nonviolence. When you're in a situation where you are overwhelmed by the opponent, you can't go in with physical violence. So try the nonviolent way. I tried to never be in a physical conflict. Of course, I had a couple of instances in grade school and junior high where somebody wanted to fight, and I'm known as the person with the silver tongue. I talked my way out of it by being calm, by if I did something, say I'm sorry, by complimenting them and getting them calm. That's the way I did it. Some people would say, oh, you're being a coward. No, I'm not being a coward. I'm staying alive. That's the important thing. So try to talk when you're in a conflict and learn what the real source is. You can never solve a conflict if you don't really know what you're arguing about. I didn't know what my children were arguing about when they were arguing about the pink cereal bowl. Because what I finally did was one day when they were at school, I melted it. I was so angry, I took it out into a metal garbage can, and I melted the thing. I thought that would solve it. But the next week they were arguing about the hairbrush. And you know that a 9-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 12-year-old have no intention of brushing their hair. And then I realized the conflict was about power. Who had the power? My oldest boy was 9 years younger than my youngest child. And so they were having a conflict about power. Once I understood that, I was able to be more effective in managing that. It wasn't about the bowl, it wasn't about the brush. So I'm glad that you joined me today to talk about conflict in a multicultural setting. I hope you learn more about this topic because we all experience it, and you can learn more by clicking on the link at the bottom of the video where you will find a PowerPoint and lecture notes. I leave you with these words from Mr. Spock on Star Trek: live long and prosper.